Started going through the yards making up fall splits. I do this from the time we pull honey off up until maybe mid-August. I like to stop the first or second week of August. Have all the splits done by then that I'm going to make for the fall. If you've seen our prior videos of when we pull our honey supers off, how we go back with these second deeps, then you'll know the setup. If not, you can go back and watch the earlier videos in this series and kind of see how we got to this point, what setup we're left with. But we've got a single queen right hive on the bottom, queen excluder in the middle, second deep on top with drawn out comb that had been extracted out already. It was honey frames that were extracted out, placed back on the box, back on top of this queen excluder. Queen excluder just left in place, and we're going to make a split from the bottom into this second deep on top, and that's the way we make up our fall splits. But what we'll do is pull. I like to pull 3 frames of brood out of the bottom hive here, and I just shake the bees off to make sure I don't get the queen. Move it into the top box and leave the queen excluder in place. I just move them on top of the queen excluder and allow those nurse bees to come up and cover those frames, make a good populated split. And I'll leave that till tomorrow. Come back tomorrow, I will pull this second deep off, set it out of the way. I'll pull the queen excluder off, put a double screen board in its place, and set this box right back on top. And that separates the hive into 2 separate hives at that point. That makes a really good split with all these drawn combs, 3 frames of open brood. I will use some cap brood in there with that. I think it's good to use some of that too, to get some more population emerging out of brand new nurse bees early on. But you need a lot of open brood. That way you've got a lot of nurse bees that moves up to cover those frames of open brood. That way those nurse bees will stay with this hive. They make the best splits when you have a lot of nurse bees. They do really good making queens or accepting queens, whatever you're using. They make a really good split. So that's how I do the setup. I typically use queen cells in these splits. I am not going to do that this time, and there's a reason for that. If you've noticed in some of our other videos, I've talked about it a little bit before, but I've spent a lot of years creating the strain of bees that I raise, and they are mite-resistant bees, highly mite-resistant. I do not treat at all. My bees have never been treated, and I never will treat them, because we've created a bee that has become very mite-resistant and able to handle mites on their own. And it's a long process, so I went through to get there. I may make a video on how we've done that. It was not intentional. Had no reasons not to treat. It was just kind of happened by accident, and I just went with it, and I started seeing some results and made the decision to not treat. I did start out with some very mite-resistant bees to begin with, so that's the only way I was able to get to the point I'm at now. You can't just take any bees and just not treat them and expect them to live, because that will not happen. you'll lose pretty much all your bees every year for a long time before you get to a point that you can go without treating. If you start out with bees that are not highly mite resistant. But yeah, it took us a lot of time. We still lost a lot of bees to get to this point. I'll probably make a video on how we did that. I do have some Auburn. If you see these orange stickers on, Auburn's done some research here lately on these bees, and I actually have I've had a lot of naysayers on being able to go without treating. I actually have some documented proof at this point, and I think I'll make a video on that later and show you that stuff and how we got there. We'll pull some splits up and let you see how I do these. The reason I'm not putting queen cells in this time is because I'm real careful not to condense my genetics and start getting inbreeding, and that'll eventually bring out, it will multiply the flaws that your bees have if you continually line breed. So each year I will bring in some outside genetics of bees that I really like, that are very mite resistant, and add them a little bit of that stock throughout my yards to kind of keep diversifying my genetics. But also this round I'm making splits on all the hives that I've got to overwinter, and I'm going to do that by walkaway splits. There's a process that I go through with a walkaway split to make the best queen possible. I'll show you that also today. But that allows me to kind of diversify my genetics through the yard, through all of my yards, instead of taking a couple of certain queens and grafting from them and really condensing my genetics down. All of the hives in each yard are not in the same situation. There's some of these are single boxes like these here. There were splits that were made recent in the summer and have recently been set off on that pallet. They may not be strong enough yet to pull a 3-frame split out of. They may be. We'll go in and look on each one. Every hive that's able to make a split out of, we will do it, even if it knocks that single hive down a little bit, because we are starting to feed and we have hopefully a good fall flow coming up that will help build that hive back out. You can make the split on top a little weaker than what I typically do, because we're going to be doing it on top of a double screen board, which allows you to overwinter a lot smaller hive than what you normally would be, because the heat from the stronger colony below is going to rise and help warm that hive on top. So that helps them get through the winter time much better. It also allows them to build out a little earlier and quicker also, because it don't take as many bees in that top hive to keep that brood nest warm. That extra heat rising from below, they can't expand that brood nest out without having as many bees to cover all that brood. So there's multiple benefits of using those double screen boards. This is a hive here. I can't remember. I think I actually pulled the queen from this hive, or either it's a hive that swarmed. I can't remember for sure, but I do have on the tag here that they have recently become queen right with a new queen. I don't know if I put a cell in it or what, but they are a lot weaker hive. Matter of fact, I don't know that this hive's queen right now. Now, not a queen in the bottom. I will check in that top box and see if maybe she's up here. It don't appear to be queen right. No. That's okay. As long as you're making plenty of hives all the time, you can stand to have some go queenless and just use another one to take its place. I don't know. Maybe I didn't. I don't. Maybe not even have actually found that one queen right before after I pulled the earlier queen out. So with these boxes here, there's multiple things that I do. I could just use these one at a time to make a split on top of these singles, put a queen excluder on and set one of these on top of it and move my split in it. Or just when I pull splits out of one of these other hives, when I open one up and see that it's really strong, got a lot of brood in it, there's enough bees in this box to make a split with. So I could just pull 1 or 2 frames out of here, pull a couple of frames with eggs from another strong hive, move into this bottom box, and the frames that I pulled out just replacing the box that I took the brood frames from, and let them make a new queen. If I had queen cells, I could just drop a queen cell in, obviously, but we're just doing walkaway splits today, so I think I'll probably grab a frame of eggs and drop in this bottom hive and leave them as a single on the bottom, give them a chance to get back queen right. If not, I really only have a chance for one try at walkaway splits, because it takes a month before you have a laying queen, and by that point you don't have enough time to try again. So if they fail at becoming queen right any of these splits on top of those screen boards or wherever they're at, when I come back through a month later and check for queen right, if they're not queen right, you don't want to set these boxes onto another hive to be, to protect your comb through the winter time, the way that I've showed you that I do a lot of times through the summer. So I'll just shake all the bees out onto another hive or wherever, and store these in our we store them in a Connex box and put some treatment on them. So I just anything that I check back in a month and find it not to be queen right, I just shake the bees out and go store it, and use these overwinter splits that do become queen right. When they overwinter come springtime, we'll just move them over into any empty spots that we've created. Some of the good things about these fall splits, the biggest thing is that these queens raised at this time of the year are going to be the optimal age come next spring, right around the time your honey flow starts, that they're going to be in the most prime part of their life of laying eggs. They grow out faster than any of the other your older hives that overwintered with older queens, and they'll keep a bigger population of bees, and then therefore make a bigger honey crop. These fall splits will be your biggest honey producers that you have the following spring. And also, it reduces the risk of swarming. These younger queens, the best queens for swarming is something raised at a queen that is mated at the very beginning of spring. She's the least likely to swarm. The younger they are, the less likely they are to swarm. But to have a hive with a queen that's able to be started in a split and be able to build their own hive up to a big enough population to make a good honey crop, this is the best time to do it, because this hive will be coming into very early spring when your pollen flow first begins. She's going to be starting to really build up to a good size hive, 5-6 frames of brood, and most likely have to pull some frames off of her to make a split before your honey flow starts. And when your honey flow rolls around, she's going to be laying faster than any other queens on average that you have on your yard that were raised at earlier times. But just much less likely to swarm, and in her prime of laying, that's the best conditions that you can create to raise, to have the biggest honey crop that you could possibly make. So these are my favorite hives to make at this part of the year, and have them in optimal condition come honey flow time to make our biggest honey crops. These do really good. As I go through each hive, I go 1 yard at a time and go through every hive in the yard. If they're able to make a split, I make a split. But if not, I'm still looking and making sure I see open brood. I want to make sure that each hive is queen right, because if you let a hive go queenless at this point, it don't take any time before population dwindles and the wax moths just eat the frames up. So you want to make sure all your hives are queen right here after the honey flow's over with. There's a higher chance of them becoming queenless when you pull honey off, especially doing a whole bunch of them. And sometimes your queens may have came through the excluder, wind up getting pulled off. There's a lot of things that could happen this time of year. Maybe had a swarm late in the honey flow and they didn't become queen right again. Just different things like that. Just typical situations of how you can lose some hives. It happens to everybody. You're going to lose some hives no matter what kind of bees you've got. Even if you're not losing any bees to mites, there's just a lot of other situations you get in where you lose a hive. That's why we produce more splits than we think we are going to need, because you're always going to have a few spots to fill in. So just make sure we'll make sure each one of them's queen right as we go through, and if not, we'll do whatever we need to do to correct that hive, whether we place it somewhere else or give them a way to get back queen right, a way to create their own queen, or drop a queen cell in them. So this hive is queen right. So here's this box I set over here out of the way that was on top of the queen excluder, on top of that box there. I like to go in and look and see how many frames of honey are in the bottom box. Kind of move past the brood, get over here to the outside edges. When you stop seeing that brood, you can start to see how much honey you got. This one may not have nothing but brood in the bottom. There's a ton of brood in here. It might have one honey frame. No, it's pretty much all brood. So that's the reason I want to look in that. So tomorrow, as I pull that queen excluder, come back and replace the queen excluder with a double screen board, separate those hives. I've got honey frames still in the top where they've put some more honey up after we've harvested. I know there's at least 4 or 5 frames of honey at least in this top box. None in there. So if I came back and split this off, I would essentially take all of their food from them, because they had it all stored in the top. So they would have no food, and I'd have, if I just pulled these open combs out of the top and put my split in that, this box would be slam full of honey. Nowhere for this hive to grow out, and that one would have no food to make it on. So as I go through, I see that I need to move some of this honey down into that box. So I will go and pull some of these good honey frames. I'll probably take, if it's got 4 frames, I'll pull 2 off. I think this one's got more than that. I pulled 2 or 3 out. There's 3 frames of honey. There's another. Yeah, I pulled 3 frames of honey out of this top box. And that's going to be the space for my 3 frames of brood to move up. Then I'll replace those 3 empty slots and put 3 frames of honey. I'll push what brood's left in the middle, put my 3 frames of honey against the walls. That way that gives both hives food. And I've also got my split moved up in the top. Everybody's going to be in good shape. It wouldn't hurt for me to give the bottom hive more honey than I did on the top, because these splits will get a bucket of honey tomorrow when I replace the double screen board with a queen excluder. I will set a 1 gallon bucket of sugar syrup on top of this top box where the split is, because it tremendously just does a lot better job with your splits as far as getting them queen right. They raise the queen a lot better. They accept the queen a lot better, and they also grow out a lot better. So now that the honey flows over with you, it's really important to get some feed on new splits. So there's a frame of open brood on one side, a lot of cap brood on that side. I'm going to use that one to start with. One whole side of open larva right there. Just a queen cup. I'm going to turn that cap brood to the outside, try to get my open brood as condensed as possible to allow them to get better coverage over those open brood cells. I do want a lot of open brood here though to draw those nurse bees. There's a lot of brood in this hive. Now with me making walk-away splits, I do have to make sure at least one of these frames has eggs. And there's eggs right there on that one with a lot of open brood. That side is pretty good. Let me see what this next one's got. A lot of honey on the top of it. I'm going to leave that one. Let's go with this one here. Shake all the bees off. Make sure what's left on there is not your queen. That's all you got to do is just make sure your queen is not on there. You don't move her in the top. That's the purpose of me shaking the bees off. So, alright, there's 3 good frames of brood. I'm going to slide this partial honey frame over. Put a good full frame of honey against that side. My brood that's left in, I'm going to move all together in the middle. Put this honey on the outside. Put my drone frame back in. That drone frame there is drawn pretty well on one side. One side is not at all. That side was against the wall. One tip to remember, I'm going to flip that now around and put the undrawn side in. That will help it get drawn out quicker. So I've got my honey frames equalized out pretty good. Got my 3 frames brood in the top. I'm going to close it up. And that's a split, almost. tomorrow, you can wait. You don't have to wait till the next day. You can give them a few hours. I just wait till the next day. Come back, bring double screen boards with me, change all the excluders. I just pull this box right back off. Pull the queen excluder off, replace it with a double screen board, put this back on top. Now, at that point, we've got two completely different hives, and they will begin to make queen cells out of the eggs and young larvae in this top box. Also, I will pull this plug and put a 1 gallon bucket of sugar syrup on top of that also to help kickstart them off. One thing that I do, if I'm going to make walkaway splits, it's very important, very, very important to remember this. If there's going to be a good population of bees up in this box tomorrow when I come and add the double screen board. With a strong population, and I mean it by strong population, this is going to have probably a good 4 frames of bees in it. And it don't take that strong of a population. If you've got 2 or 3 good frames of bees covering a hive, and sometimes less, and let them make queen cells. They're going to make multiple queen cells in this hive. And as those queen cells start to emerge out, there's going to be some difference in the ages. And as they start to emerge, the bees will sit on those queen cells and vibrate their wings, and it stops the virgins from emerging out. They will allow one to emerge out, and a lot of these bees will swarm with that first virgin and cut your population way down. And after that swarm, they'll allow more virgins to emerge out. And a lot of times they'll swarm 2, 3, maybe even more times they will swarm out, depending on the population of bees in there. And if that happens, your split's no good. You're not going to have enough bees left in there to live. It's going to just be a dead out. So what we do to handle that, this keeps them from swarming, but also creates a better queen than just allowing them to make their own. They're going to make their own, but we kind of guide them along the way. And what we do, today we make the split. Tomorrow tomorrow's really when it'll be split when we add the double screen board. So starting from tomorrow, they will start making queen cells. I give them 4 days. That allows time for, after 4 days, you come back and open it up and look. You're going to have some capped queen cells, and you should have some open queen cells. Now queen cells are not capped according to when they started that queen cell. They are capped off depending on the age of that larva that's in there. So in 4 days, the queen cells that are capped off is going to be queens that are started from older larvae, which you preferably don't want queens made from the older larva. You'd rather have queens made from the younger larva. So when you look through, you're going to find those open queen cells. That's the ones that you want. So I mash down. I actually typically leave just 1 queen cell. So I found the best looking open queen cell that I can find in there. Sometimes I leave 2, but usually 1. But definitely no more than 2. And mash all the rest of the queen cells down. And by that point, they shouldn't make any more queen cells. And you're going to be left with only what you left in the hive. And that eliminates that swarming with those virgin queens. It also allows you a better quality queen because it's made from a younger larva. If you don't have these second deeps on at this time of year with drawn out comb in them, to have, if you don't have all those resources of drawn out comb to make these splits into, that don't stop you from being able to make splits in the fall. I've done it many times without having a box full of drawn out comb. It does helps get your box filled out quicker, helps get your bees in better shape. But above those double screen boards, you've got a lot of leeway to play with as far as having a hive that's not necessarily strong enough and built up enough to make it through winter on their own. That's the biggest thing. The biggest reason those small colonies die out is they just don't have enough cluster of bees, big enough cluster to cover brood to be able to keep a hive going being able to lay enough brood and have enough brood emerge out to keep that hive strong enough to grow. And those small clusters during a really cold spell of weather will freeze to death on their own. But above those double screen boards, that heat changes the ball game. You can overwinter a very small hive. I've overwintered less than 2 frames of bees many times over a double screen board, and they've made it just fine. 1 frame of food and less than 2 frames of bees, and they usually do just fine over that double screen board. But if you don't have that drawn out comb, use what you got. If those 3 frames that you move into it is all the drawn comb you've got, that's enough. Those bees will be fine. Fill in the other 7 frames with foundation. If that's all you got, those bees will be fine. It does become more important at that point to keep them fed. If you keep them fed from the time you make that split now or in August up until it starts to get cold weather, they do have plenty of time to draw out a lot of those frames. And if you keep them fed right, keep them fed all the time, they'll probably draw out the rest of that box and even get a good amount of stored up before wintertime. So don't let that hinder you thinking that you need to have all those drawn out frames to put in there, because you really don't. Go ahead and make your splits and use foundation. It is the end of July now. We are well past our nectar flow. As you pull your supers off, there's always going to be some frames of honey down in the brood chamber, enough to last for a little while. Kind of varies place to place and hive to hive. Just kind of have to go in some hives and get an idea of what they got. But you should always have some time after you pull your honey with what they've got in the brood box. But coming up here on the end of July, we start to feed them back, and especially our splits that we make, we'll immediately start feeding them. This is a split here on top. We'll drill a hole in the top of that and put a bucket on tomorrow whenever we place the double screen board in place. All the splits, we'll get a bucket. We go through all the hives as we go make our way through each yard making splits. If they're not strong enough for a split, we still want to go through them, check them for queen rats, see what kind of shape they're in. But also, while we're doing that, we'll get an idea of the hives that we need to put buckets on. We'll start open feeding at this time, feeding some tubs and barrels, just kind of whatever we got. We put a bunch of wheat straw in to keep them from drowning, and just open feed. We'll feed a gallon and a half per hive on each yard. If there's 40 hives in the yard, we'll put 40 to 60 gallons at a time. And we don't do that a lot, maybe every couple of weeks for right now. And just kind of keep an eye on them. We want them to keep brooding up a little bit and get a good population before our goldenrod flow, and keep some weight on the hive also. If singles mostly these singles are splits that were made probably towards the end of the nectar flow, middle of the nectar flow, and were pulled off and set off or moved to other yards, things like that. Some of them are in really good shape, some of them are a little weaker than others. If they're weak, especially if they have frames of foundation that need to be drawn out, we'll mark those if we're not feeding that day, and come back and feed the next day. But if they're weak, they'll get a bucket on top, just like that one there. If they got plenty of food, and even if they don't have plenty of food, a single like this, all of our existing hives, the bottom brood boxes, we won't put feed in them. The singles that are in good shape, we won't put feed on them either. We'll just feed them by open feeding. But the ones that really need a good boost, they'll get open feeding too because they're in the same yard, but we'll also put a gallon bucket on top of them to really get them picked up good and get some frames finished drawing out and get a good amount of brood in the box and get that population built up here through the end of July through August. Our goldenrod flow starts only in September. So we want a good population of bees before that goldenrod starts, and that way we have a decent nectar flow from the goldenrod. They'll be able to really get their hives in good shape before winter, and we'll also feed through that time too. There's a lot of pollen comes in on that goldenrod, and with feeding, even if we don't have a good nectar flow, putting some feed on them will really get the hives in good shape. We kind of play it by ear, you know, and keeping a check on them and making sure by the end of October, mid to end of October, that they are heavy. We'll go over some of that later on in this video series and show how we prep hives for winter, what we're really looking for, how we feed them up, and kind of the timeline that we use to go through that. These splits that we're making now, it's a little bit more difficult to get them queen right this late in the season after the nectar flow's well past, but you still get a good many queen right. We'll make splits on top of every hive that we can and get as many queen right as possible. We'll come back when they've had time to get queen right. We'll come back and check them, and if they're queen right, good. If not, we'll pull that second deep off the top and store it just like we do our honey supers for next spring. Start making splits in them again in the springtime, but we won't leave those deeps on if they don't get queen right. We will pull them off and condense that hive down to a smaller hive. We don't want any more room on them going through winter than what's needed. We'll store them up, get that bottom brood box in good shape and heavy, and that's all the room that they need.